Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. So, I wanted to share a message with you about what I would call the cunningness of the devil or the dark side. And, the problem with this is we don't get a trial run on this life thing. And so, there's so many things competing for our attention. I think that we don't really give credence to the time that we really should be spending on wisdom and furthermore understanding. I'm reminded of Stephen Covey's book that I've mentioned to you all before. I think it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's one of those things I found in an old thrift store that it's back in the 90s, when they were kind of common. Now you can't hardly ever find them anywhere, but I just think they're a treasure, just full of old books and even music and things like that. Because, obviously now we're into the digital age, but I used to really enjoy that because you would never know, like, I'm thinking of Forrest Gump, like you never know what you're going to find, never know what you're going to get, in those kind of shops. And then now they're just basically, you can't find them anymore. But, that book by Stephen Covey, it had a section talking about the 4 quadrants, what he calls the 4 quadrants, where he divided up how we spend our time, how we prioritize the things that we do with our time in our life, and how, I forget what quadrant it was, but he talks about this like fire alarm quadrant that actually winds up taking most of our time, and obviously when that happens, that's time forever gone, forever spent, that we could have been spending on the truly important things in the other quadrants. But it's stuff that seems like an emergency, or it's got to be taken care of right now, when in reality it can either be done like later, or just done a little bit along the way, or in some cases just not done at all. A lot of things that just really present themselves in that manner, they'll just self-resolve. And so I think spending time on getting clear about those things is really important, because we learn our lessons along the way, and again, there's no trial run. It's just, so I think that prioritizing our time and trying to learn how to better use our time, because it is limited, then that's a really good and important thing, right? But learning about how cunning the devil would be right up there to me, because it's once you've experienced how you can be fooled, then you don't want to be fooled again, that's for sure. So as far as the cunningness of the devil, we're going to be looking specifically at some words today and be inspired by studying those, right? And I think this is important because language is huge. It's how we operate, and the more versed we are in something, then the more equipped we are to handle it. And I think handling it appropriately is something that is going to impact our lives greatly. Because, the Bible talks about keeping guard over our thoughts, but I don't think we give enough credence to the fact that, the language we use is a big part of that. And I think that somewhere embedded in our subconscious, or somewhere in our psyche that's not totally in the forefront of our mind, there's something working when we're using language that's affecting or influencing us in some manner that may actually be putting us in this low vibrational state, bringing us down, into this negative vibrational state, and causing us to self-sabotage. And furthermore, even if it's just getting stuck in some negative thinking, even if it's just that, because that's stealing time away from our life. And so that's what we're going to do today. And, to be versed in something means to turn over, to think it over, right? To be well versed in something, to mull it over, to marinate, like I'm always talking about on the channel, right? But let's take a look at 3 words to open up here. We're going to be looking at diffidence, vain, and conceit. And we're going to take a look at the evolution of these words and see if we can have like a clue or find a clue as to how the cunningness of the devil is also evolving just by looking at this micro example. Because a lot of times what's true on the micro is also true on the macro. It's like this one greater truth that's reflected almost like broken glass. It's like you can just break it into tiny pieces and you're still going to see the same truth everywhere. So with diffidence, I'm just pulling this from the online etymology dictionary, which I use a lot on my channel. I love it. But so from the 1400s, the meaning started with being related to distrust or doubt with regards to the ability or disposition of others. Right? Wanting to have confidence in others, but having this doubt, having this distrust. But it's. I want us to pay attention with how it's positioned in relation to others. And then what's interesting is by the 1650s, it had shifted into a distrust of oneself. Isn't that interesting? The want of confidence in one's own ability, worth, or fitness, right? So just a kind of a big deal to shift away from the perspective of looking out here to looking in here. And see, on the surface, that seems like a good thing, but we're going to talk about it. The other word we're going to take a look at is vain. Vain. So from the 1300s, it meant devoid of real value, idle or unprofitable, void, worthless, invalid. So not necessarily a bad thing. See, could be, but sort of a neutral term, just a label to with regards to the value of something, right? And then notice the transition. It says first recorded in the 1690s. It started to be related to being conceited or elated with a high opinion of oneself, right? Foolish. So again, you see that evolution, how it goes from just a useful term that's kind of neutral to say, this is vain. It's not going to produce any fruit, doesn't necessarily have to mean in relation to a person, but it could be like one's efforts. Like, hey, I think I'm doing this in vain, trying to plant a garden here because, maybe there's too much shade. There's not enough sunlight. So I'm just doing this in vain. Just kind of a neutral term, see? But then over time, it comes to mean something about oneself and furthermore in a negative light. Now let's take a look at the word conceit. So from the late 14th century, it meant a thought, a notion, that which is mentally conceived. Again, a very neutral term. Okay? And then by the, let's see, it shifted obviously is my point here. That was the late 14th century. So by the 1500s, it had shifted to mean vanity, an exaggerated estimate of one's own mental abilities. So just in those 3 words that came to mind, I tried to think of words that were just kind of had a negative connotation, because I've seen unintentionally just through my research how terms tend to evolve over time, and I've noticed a pattern where they seem to evolve in a negative way. And I know there's always been negativity in the world. There's always been evil and darkness in the world since the beginning of time, from the story of the first two human beings in the Garden of Eden. I get it. But again, I think it's worthy that we take notice of this and that we at least give a little bit of thought, to it. So, yes, in those terms, we see the evolution of how they're made personal and they're made negative, right? As opposed to just starting out just neutral and useful. So these are not only personal qualities now, those terms, but they are also, and here's the key, judgmental. they became judgmental terms. And with that, it's like giving them power. It's like amplifying them for the bad side. You see what I'm saying? Remember, Adam and Eve were instructed in the garden not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? So again, because that's putting the that's taking away the concept of living by God's will, the higher knowledge, and trying to do it oneself, right? Taking that on oneself. And so it's like just a disaster waiting to happen. But we can see this reflected even in our language, right? So it's almost like the evolution of, if you look at the language here, it's like the evolution of self-focus and self-reliance. And it's always been there to a degree, but it just seems like a snowball rolling down the hill. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You see what I'm saying? I wonder if it feels that way to you too. Of course, sometimes, when things happen in our personal life, it just makes them seem bigger than life. It puts them right in front of our face, and it's hard to deny, But it to me, it does. It just seems like the evolution of self-focus, self-reliance, and narcissistic type qualities, right? And we all have some of those qualities, but if you just look at the grander picture, which we're going to do today, it kind of paints a picture, So it's not that these qualities didn't exist before the words evolved, but that it's that judgment, right? It's spreading. This judgment is spreading like far and wide. Again, a self-reliance in a negative way, which creates, the result would be this, not just independence, but like this isolation type approach to life, which is the opposite of unity. See? So, and love, even if it's not between two human beings, even if it's just love in general, there's a relationship part of that, a requirement of a relationship, even if it's between you and God, So there's this spirit of disunity, you might say, that's coming about, right? So what does the Bible tell us about judgment? It's a trap. It's a trap, which is why we have the whole story of the serpent in the garden, right? It's a trap of, thinking that to be self-reliant is a good thing, a good stance to have, but in reality it's a trap. So, I personally, this is just my opinion, I believe that the devil's main goal is to halt life in so many different ways, in any way, just to put a stop to it, whether it's literal, physical, or it's the life force energy within, a human body or a human being's experience, just to get you stuck, to put up this block. And I'm reminded when I'm thinking about judgment and how we're all kind of getting pulled into this trap of wanting to be reliant on our own self-judgment so heavily. I'm reminded of this book that I've mentioned before called Becoming a Writer by Dorothea Brande. And it's the whole takeaway for me in that book was when you're trying to create a book or write a book, when you're in the creation process, which as you're living your life, it's the same thing. You're engaged in a creation process moment by moment in your life. But in the book, it was saying if you're trying to create the story, then you can't edit it as you go. Because if you do, it's going to be just one stumbling block after another. If you're just constantly stopping and checking it and correcting it, and utilizing, judgment in the moment, it just kind of halts the process. And her point was that it can actually kill the creativity. So I think it's the same way in our life. It trips us up. It's a trap. Whether it's directed at ourselves, just this internal dialogue, or maybe there's not a dialogue. Maybe it's just, this uncertainty that just stops you every step along the way, or whether it's coming from this toxic person outside of you in your life that's making you question yourself. Whatever it is, just a bad environment or atmosphere that just causes you to question everything constantly. It's still stopping that flow of life, and that's what I want to focus on. See, so let's look at another example. Another example would be the word confidence. So I just had the lights flash here, which was kind of weird. There's no storm or anything, but so the word confidence. This is from the 1400s. The definition was assurance or belief in the goodwill, veracity, etc. of another. Again, we're seeing a term originating, at least from this earliest definition that I'm finding here from the 1400s, originating with the outside world, with others. There's an otherness, right? Assurance or belief in the goodwill, veracity, etc. of another. So we're looking at a positive meaning. We're looking at an external meaning. And then let's take a look at the shift. So it says from the mid-15th century, it began to mean reliance on one's own powers. Who does that sound like? It sounds like a very envious, jealous devil, doesn't it? And I don't know what it is about the darkness, but it's like it just wants everybody, it wants to rope everybody into it, So, yes, a reliance on one's own powers, resources, or circumstances, self-assurance. Self-assurance. Trying to cut God out of the equation. I'm not left-handed, so it's kind of hard. There we go. It's like, again, you can't continue in the creation of even your own life by cutting God out of it. God is that source, through the spiritual lens, and I invite you to apply your own lens, but through the spiritual lens, that's where that life force energy comes from, that flow, right, comes from that source. The source is God. And so when you shift, say, even subconsciously, unintentionally, when we shift our perspectives onto self-reliance, it's like this epidemic of narcissism when we don't even know it. You see what I'm saying? Just running in the background, unintentionally, affecting us, persuading us, coercing us. It's psychological warfare, right? Not just spiritual, but also truly psychological, because if you are coerced into doing something, yeah, you did it, but you may not even be aware that you did it, and you certainly wouldn't even know why you did it. It's like the hidden hand, somebody working you from the background to achieve their own goal. And so we're just trying to understand how the darkness works by examining these things today. And so, yes, again, all of those examples there, we looked at 4. Diffidence, if you want to take notes and just jot these down and just further research, diffidence, vain, conceit, and confidence. They all started out by being about another. They end up being about oneself. And furthermore, with confidence, this was interesting. Okay. When I said furthermore, this is what I want to talk about. So the first 3, diffidence, vain, and conceit, ended up being about oneself, ended up being personal, but in a negative light. Confidence is usually associated with a positive thing. To be confident is supposedly a good thing. But what I want us to understand is that can be a tool for amplification, okay, exploitation. So we're going to go a little bit deeper now, okay? So it's almost like part of this cunning quality that the devil has is to keep us divided, not only literally, but also within our own minds by conditioning our subconscious into what? Into black and white thinking. All right, so So we have one side of the spectrum, which is judgment, okay? And this is, we're just going to look at it through the lens of a personal thing, because that's where all these terms ended up. So, but you can apply it on a larger scale, certainly, like anything. But on the spectrum, you might consider on one side there's judgment, there's feeling disempowered, bad feelings like shame and uncertainty and all this. And then on the other end of the spectrum, because we're thinking about black and white thinking, okay, you have total confidence to the degree that you have like this overinflated ego. See? All right, this is important. So the message again is that what if this cunningness of the devil is starting to be revealed as we look and research, in that it's driving us. The ultimate goal is to drive our thinking into extremes, into the opposite ends of the spectrum, right? For a reason, which we'll look at. So in our example, one end is feeling disempowered and just judging oneself and just caught up in doubt and all this. And then on the other end, you have the opposite, which is like a huge ego, okay? So what's happening is the elimination of the middle ground, which is interesting because I've known someone from another country, and I won't get into it because I don't like to really talk politics or anything, but this person was very familiar with their own country, let's put it that way. And in this particular country, there was a strong movement that was very evident already in the with the goal being to eliminate the middle class. And so it's kind of strange that I'm just, I happen to recall that because it feels like it's in alignment with eliminating the middle ground with our thinking too. Just extremes. It's just black and white, this polar opposite way of approaching life on all levels. It's just something to think about and to be aware of and to notice. Because we can so easily be lulled to sleep by our subconscious being worked, and we don't even catch it. So, it gives to me a new perspective to the straight and narrow way. Even if you try to operate balanced, it's not uncommon to be judged for not being judgmental. Have you noticed? For not picking a side, you can be judged for that. For not approaching life in this, one side or the other extreme, So just something to think about. It's almost like politically incorrect, really, to live in neutrality. So, but society pumps up our ego, don't you think? And it sets the bar at a very selfishly high level. And those whose spirits are broken are exploited because the people who have bought into this lie of, of an egotistical way of life, okay, they can exploit people who are brokenhearted, okay? They do this by feeling superior, just putting themselves up on this pedestal and comparing themselves. And also, they can boost their ego by helping people, like, oh, here you go. And just, in a manner that it's, it's getting attention. It's showy. It's flashy. It's transactional. It's not just truly from the goodness of their heart. It's so that they can just pump their own ego up even more. And so, my point here is that everything serves ego. Right? And we might see this as, gluttonous desire and unquenchable hunger. And again, the Bible explains the devil seeks to devour, to steal, kill, and destroy, but that he roams around. He roams around like a hungry lion. And so, a ravenous even. So again, that would go in alignment here with my unquenchable hunger. So, we read these Bible verses, and it's to me, part of our work is that we, make the connection of how do these relate to our life? How can we identify this stuff in real life? It's one thing to read it and just kind of keep it in the back of our mind as a fairy tale, but it's another to actually be like, okay, how do I apply this in life? How do I identify these things in my life on the small scale and on the bigger scale? So, just like with a malevolent person, I mentioned the term recently, Machiavellianism. It's kind of like that with the darkness. Any engagement at all with the darkness or with a person operating in the darkness with bad intentions, right? Any engagement at all feeds them. It feeds them, which is why it's called supply. Very popular term these days, but it's true. It's like anything you say or reveal to these people can and will be used against you. That's why silence and keeping your pearls to yourself truly is the way to go, because you can't win by engaging with them at all, because you're playing their game. Any engagement is playing their game. So eventually, this is what I've discovered. Eventually, every part of your life becomes your pearls. With some people especially. The middle path, coming back to the topic here, and we're going to wrap it all together. But the middle path is where peace is found, which is interesting because just, journaling, that was my conclusion. And then I thought, I feel like I've heard a quote about this or something. Yeah, that came from Buddha, actually, who spoke about the middle path, or the avoidance of extremes. So even your sharing, you don't always know who is sick, who's mentally unwell, and to what degree even. So even oversharing is making yourself vulnerable. That's why, to me, there's something very sacred and holy, even, about preservation and reservation. Because if you think about it, what you reserve, you preserve. See, if you're thinking about your pearls. So, the tree in the Garden of Eden that was all about having the knowledge to judge, good and evil. The point, I feel like, is that if you tap into that, you go that route, you have to pick a side then, see. So the less we do this, the less regret we'll have. And I think that, yes, just to operate in this world, we have to have discernment. We have to think about what we're doing and make wise decisions. So, yeah, we have to use judgment with the big things. But I feel like we're tempted left and right to use judgment on everything to the extreme, and it's exhausting, and it's unnecessary, and it's stressful, and it's uncalled for, and which is why you hear a lot of parents especially, joke and throw around the phrase, pick your battles, because kids make everything a big deal, right? So as a parent, you definitely want to pick your battles. But with somebody who exploits, again, whether you're in a broken state or your ego is pumped up, they're going to exploit you, okay? If you're in a broken state, you may not be judgmental at all, or you may self-judge or never question, anybody else, or you may make excuses for other people. That's perfect. That's perfect for someone to just swoop in and take advantage of that. And then if your ego is pumped up, that can be exploited too. So, either way makes you vulnerable. So, what we want to do is bridge the gap and just walk that balanced middle ground, middle path. That's what we want. When we're not broken and we aren't consumed by a big ego, there's not a lot to exploit. Because both brokenness and ego create something. What is that? if you think about it, both brokenness and ego create need. And it's needs that are and can be exploited. So, and two, I believe it's needs that keep us blind to red flags. I truly do. And it's really another lens you might look at it through would be just an unconscious lack or victimhood mindset, right? So does having needs automatically mean that you're seeking to have them met in or through a relationship? Because that sounds kind of narcissistic right there. I would say no, definitely not, okay? All things considered, there are reasonable expectations like companionship, and that things should be reciprocal and not self-serving. Ideally, we would feel whole and complete, though, and very healthy first before engaging in a relationship of any kind, a friendship or a romantic relationship. And then we'd be able to share our life from that space. That's the goal. So let me share with you Matthew chapter 25, verse 29. This is a really good example here. It says, "For to everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away." That's a perfect example of victimhood mindset and how focusing on the negativity can just, self-perpetuate. And same thing when you're in an abundance mindset or walking in the faith walk, you might say, but tempered with humility, And I was reminded of that verse by another channel I watch. I'll drop a link below. She's really encouraging to listen to. I'll share that with you all. Her name's Emily Rose Lewis, and she mentioned that verse. I think it was last night, actually. So, but it's about walking in balance. It's about the faith walk. Abundance tempered with humility. Avoiding the trap of judging self and others. Because it's kind of like how egotistical is it to even think that we have the authority to do that? Not just about others, judging others, but even ourselves. You know what I mean? So when we're kind of feeling, down on ourselves and, just stuck in this negative thinking and judging ourselves, it's like, in a way, if you step back and look at it, it's like, I really don't even have the authority to do that, So, something to think about. So we can discern what we see and experience from a place of desiring peace and safety for ourselves and our family and act accordingly, right? But understanding that the only idol we should serve is the one who made us, right? And attach ourselves to and be reliant upon. And so, y'all, I found the most interesting historical Christian fiction. It's really cool. I'm going to share with you the book that I found it in, but it's from 1678. It's a Christian allegory called The Pilgrim's Progress. And I thought, just in my short bit of research on it, it was just really interesting. It was very reminiscent of the hero's journey. And so, but I believe this came first. So if I'm not mistaken, it was Joseph Campbell that first introduced the hero's journey. So again, I'm just reminded there's no new things under the sun, right? So, but it was just really interesting. So I may record a reading of an online article about it. For you guys, just to have something to relax to, listen to if you're just kind of wanting to zone out and feed your mind a little bit, just kind of gently, So the book I want to share with you all is called The Writer's Map, and it's just a beautiful illustrated book, and it's all about maps that are it says an atlas of imaginary lands. So there you go. There's a perfect example. But on page 46, it's showing maps of that story, Pilgrim's Progress. And it's just really interesting because it's got, it's kind of showing there's like a spiral on one page, and it's sort of like talking about the journey, and it's really all about the hero's journey. You have to cross the river of death, and then to get to the what they call the celestial city. There's color symbolism in here. Just it has to be important. All the people, they're colored in either blue or red, and I feel like there's significance there. And then there's even on this other page 47. I think this might be a different. Looks like it's not a close-up. I believe it's a totally different map of the Pilgrim's Progress. There's even like it shows Lot's wife as a pillar of salt. It shows her that way. So it's just it's really interesting, and I might even get that book, and we might even look into that. But that's how I was made aware of this story, was through this book I have about maps. So they're just the coolest. So this story and these maps, the Pilgrim's Progress, they perfectly represent all the trappings of the fallen world. So that's why I'm thinking, maybe we should explore that. And so, yeah. And I was talking about the colors even and symbolism. It's almost like it makes you wonder if symbolism is even at work within our minds on a subconscious level. So that's important. We need to be conscious of what's going on, in our minds as much as possible. So again, I just want to close with this. Of all the things competing for our attention, I believe we genuinely need to invest in wisdom and understanding to give ourselves and our future generations a better and safer quality of life. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much for coming along to hear it. And happy holidays, Merry Christmas, if you're watching this in real time. And I just hope it's a very a good holiday for you, very peaceful. And again, I just thank you so much for going on this journey with me. So have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.